now listening to theGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writing Black on theGrio's Black Podcast Network. I am your host, Maiysha, and today we are welcoming playwright, composer, and Detroit native Michael R. Jackson. His musical, A Strange Loop, has broken barriers in the metaverse as a musical about a Black queer man writing a musical about a Black queer man writing a musical, and has also earned a Pulitzer Prize and a Tony Award for its writer. This excerpt might explain why.
With a portrait of a portrait of a portrait of a Black queer face and a choir full of Black queer voices, treble clef
and also bass
that are casting spells to conjure up a
big Black and queer as American Broadway.
Big Black and queer as American Broadway. Big Black and queer.
Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Maiysha. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. Like, you know, the theater kid in me is like geeking out over this. And I, listen, this has been such an exciting year for you. I know that, A Strange Loop has been in the ether for several years, but if I'm not mistaken, you opened on Broadway this spring and brought home the Tony. Your speech was fantastic. I also, I got to say, I'm the lifestyle editor here at theGrio, and I love that you wore a tribute to Andre Leon Talley on the red carpet. So shouts on that as well with the cape. But tell me, what has this been like for you this year, this recognition, and particularly for this piece, which I know had some parallels with your own story?
It's been really affirming and validating in a lot of ways, particularly of the importance of taking one's time in making a piece of art. I'd spent almost 20 years working on this musical, and there were many times when I could have just sort of hung it up, but I didn't. I kept working on it, and so to be sort of as validated and awarded as we've been has been really a nice testament to the importance of letting the art that you make take the time that it takes.
I love that because I think we see people, right? We see people like you or any number of other names that we know these days, and we think, oh, it's like they just came out of nowhere and it just happened for them. But a lot of us know that for every overnight success, there were they were decades in the making. There was so much love and pain and tenacity and frustration. Right? That went into that. Not speaking for myself or anything, but because I too have worked on a musical for a long time, so I know this particular battle. This piece, A Strange Loop is unique in that it centered a hero we hadn't seen before, right? And you open this show, from the very first number, we are introduced to this character who is American, yes, Black, gay, fat, right? You kind of run down this gamut of marginalization. And I read
and class,
class.
some of it's he went to grad school.
That's right.
He, all these things it's
that's right. So there's this combination
on this sort of
exactly
intersections.
I love that you said that. Yes, yes, because you are this character went to NYU. I believe you did as well, right?
I did,
and
twice.
Twice, exactly. Hey Tish, shout out to Tish.
Hey Navient, hey Citibank student loans.
Yeah, good times. I had one of those.
I still have one. I have one last one that I'm paying down.
Oh my gosh! And what a time to talk about that. We might need to double back to that because people, again, the tremendous investment it takes to develop art as well, and so this idea. And it's so funny because we're both theater kids, I had this thought to myself that I wanted to approach this interview a little differently than I typically do, which was do a little word association, right? Mm-hmm. So here's a trigger word. We talk about intersectionality a lot, right? Black people, we talk about it a lot. The phrase was popularized by Black women. But
yeah, I just met Kimberly Crenshaw last weekend at a wedding.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Okay, so The envy
Yeah.
is strong with this one right now. That's incredible. But, you know, the fact is everybody's living in an intersection. I mean, everybody, everywhere, whether they want to recognize it or not. The onus always falls, it seems to be, on the most marginalized to discuss their intersectionality. But, like, this is such a huge part of the story, and you even poke fun at it a little bit. So, like, can we talk about intersectionality and what that means to you at this juncture?
You know, that's a really good question, because I feel like there was a time when I sort of probably was more inclined to sort of subscribe, like, to using that term in terms of my own life. Like, but I think as the years have gone by and sort of things have changed for me, I'd sort of question it a little bit, because I'm finding that my experience as sort of an individual and anybody else's experience as an individual can sometimes diverge from, like, what we automatically assume any of our intersections mean.
Right. And
so I find it like I'm always trying to find this balance between drawing a conclusion from I am a Black gay man who at whatever, and what my sort of individual circumstances are. So it's a tricky thing. Like, I think, like, it's like a whole conversation. Like, I don't have like a set sort of association with intersectionality.
No, I mean, I actually love that answer, and I love the way that you took it on in A Strange Loop, which I spent quite a bit of time with recently with the music and the words there. Yeah, you know, like, usually if I'm interviewing an author, you know, who's written a book, you know, I would sit here and I would read the book and take my notes. This was a different kind of project for me that really struck at my heart, because I'm both a writer and a musician, and I sat with it. I've spent time with this music and these words, and you know, one of the ideas that I think we get also from this character, and I love that you talked about intersectionality in that way, and that we're also talking about intersections of privilege, disadvantage, and even, like, yes, what does it mean to be Black when you talk about intersectionality? Because you challenge that as well, because your character has another phrase I'm going to ask you to riff on, an inner white girl, which I have one too, or maybe a couple.
Yeah. I mean, and also just to double back a little bit, it's like, I think also, you know, I mentioned sort of the class element before. It's like, I think there's also, like, regionalism that sort of comes into play. Like, where are you from?
Right.
Like, what kind of community were you raised from? I'm from Detroit. But I'm from, like, a very sort of solidly, like, I used to describe myself as middle class. Like, we didn't have that, and I had, like, relatives who had less than us. So it was, and I had a lot of opportunities, growing up in Detroit with the parents that I had, who had a sort of, like, standard middle class jobs. Like, my father was a police officer who sort of rose in the ranks, and my mother was a finance professional at General Motors. And so, like, when I think of this sort of the intersectionality of it all, is I have to factor all of that in there, of, like, what did that mean? Like, I went to, you know, the same Baptist church every Sunday that, like, you know, was a big part of how I was raised. And so that's a part of the intersection as well. I went to some of the best Black schools that we had, best magnet schools in Detroit, you know.
Cass Tech,
all of those things are like Cass Tech, Golightly Educational Center. My parents sent me out of the country on exchange programs. Like, I had a lot of opportunities that were both sort of usual and unusual at the same time. And so I just always, like, that's part of why I'm always thinking about it. But I'm sorry, the question you had asked was about...
Well, I was talking about your inner white girl, but, you know, another word... But you know what? We can double back to that if you want.
Part of that. But the inner white girl, I think, is also part of that, because my parents gave me so many opportunities to, like, pursue... Because they wanted to keep me and my brother, like, away from danger and away from getting, wrapped up in any bad elements. So like, they're like, yes, you will go to tennis camp one summer. And yes, you'll go to vacation Bible school every summer. Yes, you will. Now you're going to do baseball. Now you want to take dance class. Oh, you like acting. You're going to be, I was in the same all city black chorus from like 7th grade to 12th grade. And so a lot of my love of art came because my parents just kept me busy and they let me pursue what I wanted to pursue. And in pursuing that, I came across a lot of music and art that I liked, such as, Liz Phair, Tori Amos, Joni Mitchell, and others who helped me as I was starting to come out of the closet as gay, as a teenager, as I was starting to try. I knew I wanted to be a writer of some kind, but I hadn't found my voice. And listening to a lot of these women sort of really do what they did in this really excellent sort of unfiltered way, opened a door of like, what is possible? Can I be that vulnerable in front of people? Can I have that much candor? Can I be that raunchy? Can I do all of those things in my own writing? And so they gave me a little, blueprint to sort of follow, while at the same time, maintaining my own personal integrity and having my own story and background that I came from. And so that inner white girl for me is more about that, the sort of the freedom, the artistic freedom that then can in its own way become a kind of personal freedom.
Black boys don't get to be ultra vulnerable and luscious. Don't get to be wild and unwise. Don't get to be shy and introspective. Don't get to make noise. Don't get to fantasize.
In a strange loop, the line between art and life is so very thin. And I see this sort of inner white girl as being a kind of abstract red pill, I guess, or black pill. I always forget which one of those is, because I only saw The Matrix one time. Like I tasted an elixir and I stepped through, door number 3 or whatever.
I mean, she is kind of the manic pixie dream girl of this whole scenario, in the sense of like being a vehicle for this black boy joy, because you kind of idealize
and misery,
right?
And black boy misery.
Fair, very fair.
Like really important.
Yeah, no,
because he doesn't have a lot of joy until like the only joy he really has is in creating, as a way to like get out of life, out of the sort of difficulties of life.
And we'll be right back with more Writing Black.
Witty, honest, entertaining. Introducing Dear Culture with Panama Jackson on the theGrio Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the theGrio mobile app for all the Black culture debates you don't want to miss. Also available wherever great podcasts are heard.
Okay, we are back with more Writing Black.
One of the things that I do think struck me about the song that you write about, this dynamic, this dichotomy rather, is this idea of like this woman being fearless and being able to express herself in ways that are not beholden to culture or beholden to your parents or beholden to all those things that I know that, those of us who grew up in that. I mean, I grew up very similarly to you. I'm sitting in Chicago as we speak. So, the whole,
right.
And I was born in Minneapolis. So I get it. Joni Mitchell, we right here, so
Joni Mitchell never lies.
But yeah, so that part to me, like my empathy is so strong there in terms of like this idea of what does that even mean? Like this idea of like a particular kind of blackness, and particularly coming out of Detroit, which, from a musical tradition, that everybody associates with Detroit. And A Strange Loop is not that. Like this is, I went through this as a musician where it's like, this idea that as a black person, you were expected to make quote unquote urban music.
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing, and I guess I haven't had a lot of time to really break this down in terms of like influences on the show or where I'm coming from, is that that's all in there as well. because like if you listen, for example, to the vocal harmonies of the Thoughts in A Strange Loop, that's all literally because the first music I ever heard was my parents' Motown, the Philadelphia sound, all of that soul music that is like so deeply embedded in my soul. Growing up playing gospel music in church,
I definitely
every
heard that,
Sunday,
yes.
For choirs, that's all part of like my foundation. And so I just always like to share that with people, because some people try to like get it twisted on, I'm not saying that you're doing that, but that on this sort of the white girl music or the urban sound. I don't have any aversion really to any of that. I gravitated to what I gravitated toward in this sort of search for artistic freedom.
No, I mean, I think I was more referring to the fact that, like, even as the character Usher says, this idea of like a Black musical, like they want to see us in a certain way, like with our bouffant hairdos and our, these jukebox kind of musicals, which nothing wrong with that. I love a good jukebox musical. But coming at this from such an original approach of, like, for instance, I always joke, I'm like, my partner always jokes with me. He says, he's like, more random white music than any Black person I've ever met in my life. And I'm like, I'm part of the MTV generation. I'm Gen X, And so I grew up in an atmosphere that was equal parts Motown and Prince and R&B and hip hop, because that's part of that generation too. But also, when they wouldn't play Black people on MTV, and it's all like David Bowie and Elvis Costello and like, all that kind of stuff too.
Right.
And what I love,
and like
exactly,
Red Hot Chili
and so
Peppers.
like what I love about In Excess, right? So what I love about what you've done here is exactly that. Like it's like taking a piece for those of us who live in that particular niche of Blackness, which I actually think is as you say, it's regional, but it's also generational too. If you came up in that like older millennial to Gen X era, where you're like, all this music is clashing in popular culture with MTV for a lot of kids. We come home after school and that was like our babysitter for the latchkey generation.
Big Black and queer as American Broadway.
Big Black and queer as American Broadway. Big Black and queer as American Broadway.
I felt like you really hit on something there. But I do want to talk about Detroit, because I think, again, like what an incredible place to come from, what an incredible tradition to come from. You and I both live in cities that were, products in many ways of the Great Migration in terms of its Black populations. And there's a lot of expectations that go along with that. And your parents play a really big role in A Strange Loop as well. So like, what was that like? Okay, you're right. Usher's parents. Let me not do that. You're right. Usher's parents. I feel like I heard you, I read where you described it as them like a caricature of these parents that aren't necessarily your parents per se.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But also even within the musical, it's his perception, because he's coming from such a negative space, that everything that you see is just because that's the almost Instagram filter that he has over his brain until he realizes what he realizes about himself. And so to me, all of the depictions in the piece are both his sort of quest for truth to like show what it's really like, but also what it feels, but what it really is like is what it feels like. And when you feel something is a certain way, it is that way. Like you can't, like if you like are in like the moments when I was in my 20s and I just thought the world was like, the world is a vampire. Like that's how I felt. And as long as I felt that way and saw through those little goggles of everything looked like a nightmare. Like all the time.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more Writing Black.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
All right, we're back. Let's get into it.
This is a podcast that, we created to really talk about what it means to bring your identity to your craft, right? And one of the things I think, like, for me, made this such a dream to interview you was that you wrote a musical that to me is very much about writing, like what this is like, what this particular torturous yet inevitable, because if you're a writer, you're a writer, you just can't not do it, as torturous as it can be, right? That you somehow managed to bring this to the fore in terms of like what this process is actually like, and how your thoughts are your enemies, they are your allies, they are your like what an incredible feat. So I mean, I just say that to say congratulations, because like I don't know that I've seen that as accurately portrayed. And it is relatable, right? Like people are really responding to this, not just Black people, not just queer people, not just creative people.
Yeah, a lot of folks. Yeah, well, I think it's because everybody has their own strange loop. Like they had their own way that they see things until it changes or doesn't change, Everybody has a moment in their lives when they go, why did I do that? Like, and it doesn't have to be about what Usher went through, but like you have this moment of like, I fucked up, and like,
or many moments,
torturing yourself about it, and really, for many moments, the thing that you wish that, what is that, the spirit on the stairs, the thing that you wish that you had said, that French expression, and that's why I think that like so many different people who are not Black, queer, whatever. Are able to find a way into the show.
It's opened a door, but it's also, I think it's important to note that Usher is not just a creative, he's also a critic, right? And he's a critic of a lot of things, but he's a critic of of what we think of as Black culture. Like, okay, Tyler Perry, word association.
Tyler Perry, complicated.
It is.
It's complicated.
You compared Tyler Perry to diabetes.
Have a texted. Usher compared.
You wrote it. Okay, you wrote it. But
Tyler Perry to diabetes.
Yes, okay. You okay?
I was just channeling.
Right. You're right.
I was just channeling the muses.
The thoughts came through
sent that to me to Usher. The thoughts came through. Also, but the thing about it is that like Usher, but then when he did that, what did the ancestors say?
Right.
Who the fuck is you, nigga? Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what I love about that moment is that like he's not off the hook. He like has his opinions and his little snobberies and whatever here and there, and his thoughts also, which are part of him,
they check
also
him.
are
they
like
check
fighting
him.
with him about that. Of like how dare you? But he also is like, well, how dare you? They're like, who the fuck is you? Who the fuck is you? And they're like, well, who the fuck is you? Like they do Sheree and Marlowe in South Africa. I don't know if you know the reference or not, but that's like what's happening. Like Usher is like being Sheree and Marlowe arguing with himself about Tyler, which I think a lot of people have this about whoever. Everybody has their white whale that they want to slay.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think it's
fun too. I mean, listen,
like, and interesting.
Anyone can get it, right? Anyone can get it. Beyonce's not immune.
Right.
Rihanna's not immune. Anyone can get it.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more Writing Black.
Introducing Dear Culture with Panama Jackson on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Bring your friends for the shenanigans and stay for the edutainment as Panama debates culture wars, Janet Jackson versus Michael, Black fashions, Black mendations, and everything Black. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app for all the Black culture conversations you don't want to miss. Also available wherever great podcasts are heard.
Okay, and we are back with more Writing Black.
Now, you, Usher, this piece, have entered the very pop cultural lexicon that you, or Usher, are critiquing. And what is that like?
It's interesting because, again, like the thing that I can't impress upon you or anybody enough is that I was not trying to go to Broadway.
Fair.
Like when I started it. Like that was not ever like in my, because I was like, there's no way. Like when I started working on this piece in 2003, like I was like, oh, this is just something for me to get some feelings and thoughts out. And then I began to morph and change and grow into something bigger than just what was initially my personal experience. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can, if I'm lucky, I'll get like a nice off-Broadway presentation somewhere. And so then when I got that, I was like, oh, that's like the ceiling. It can never be any greater than that. And so then when it started to go beyond that, like first with the Pulitzer and then going to Broadway and then the Tony, like I was like, oh gosh. And so watching it all happen, I'm just like amazed because I didn't plan it. I kept chasing after a story and after a loop, you know, to try to figure something out. I was only really interested in the actual artistic exploration for its own sake. And then it just so happened that then met up with a professional opportunity, which is sort of reminds me of that thing that like my high school or my middle school, like principal used to always say that Oprah and everybody says is luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And that was very true. Like I just had worked on it for so long with my collaborators. And then one day, like there was like an opportunity and we were ready to take it.
All those black gay boys I knew who chose to go back to the Lord. How one little black gay boy I knew who chose to turn his back on the Lord.
As the elders say, you know, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. But listen, the fact is also 20 years in the making, everybody also doesn't get the opportunity or doesn't find that moment, because, we've also met a moment. I think this is true of so many Black talents right now who are worthy, who should be seen, who have stories to tell, who have relatable stories or not relatable stories, but they're still stories worth hearing. That we're finally in this moment, however fleeting, that they're ready to be heard or people are looking for those stories. Did you feel that was happening? Did you feel that was just kind of ancillary to what you were already doing?
Do you mean in terms
the cultural
of
climate,
sort of cultural climate, or
things becoming
artistic,
more binary in many ways, and therefore more expressive Black narratives being told. I'm just speaking of Black narratives right now, but this could be true of a lot of different narratives. We watched, for instance, in 2020, like there were books that had been out for years that all of a sudden were bestsellers, by folks that I've admired for ages and been like, oh, look at that. Nobody saw this book when it came out 3 years ago,
Well, I mean, I guess like that's sort of where, maybe I have to sit with the line, who knew that intersectionality could be so lucrative, That but I also think that it's not new. I think there's, I went recently to the African American History Museum for the first time. I'd never been there. And I went there over a 2-day period so I could see the whole main exhibit from beginning to end. And the thing I noticed is that there were lots of sort of periods where there would be all this struggle and then there would be like a burst of for lack of a better word, renaissance, or there would be some oh my gosh, there's all this art or whatever or activity, and then there would be then it would die down and then there'd be more struggle and then more renaissance and I feel like I just noticed that happens so many times in periods in history. And so I kind of wonder if 2019, 2020 is one of those moments, and whether we will see another sort of recession, but I also feel like, in those moments, those are moments that some of the artists, they either are enduring or they aren't. And I'm not saying that that has anything to do with their worthiness, but that just seems to continue to happen. And I think that also happens in other communities that are not Black as well. Like, you know, whatever's happening, like I remember learning in college that, you know, when there was sort of this existential fear of like the bomb dropping, you got like these plays like Waiting for Godot and Samuel Beckett and you know, Death of the Salesman, and like there would always would be these works that sort of would like flourish in the sort of the tumult. And so I mean, I kind of attribute those patterns a little bit to what you're describing. And also, you know, obviously, Black folks in particular we've always been pushing to be heard and seen and all of that. And I guess for me personally, the question that I've started to really like plant my flag in is that, or the idea is that for me, being seen is not enough. I want you to think about my work and about what is being seen, what is being said, what is being represented. It's not enough for me to be like, okay, Black writer wins Pulitzer, Tony, whatever. It's like, what is he saying? Let's like talk about the ideas inside of it, and let's keep talking about those ideas. Let's argue about them. Let's compare and contrast them to others. Let's have there be a rich dialogue about what people are thinking. Let there be disagreements, and let those disagreements flourish and start whole, you know, schools of thought, you know, like, and have many of them.
All right. Well, we'll be back with more Writing Black.
The Griot Black Podcast Network is here. Everything you've been waiting for. Black culture amplified. Find your voice on the Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the Griot mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
Okay, and we are back with more Writing Black.
What do you want to talk about next?
So my next musical is called White Girl in Danger. And it sort of comes from like a childhood love of soap operas and Lifetime movies and melodrama in general. And I sort of have been thinking about how I think A Strange Loop is very much about the concept of I. And I think that White Girl in Danger at its core ends up being about the concept of we. And there's relationships between I and we, of course, but I'm meditating on this idea of like representation, equity, diversity, inclusion. What does that mean? What are the implications of that? What happens when you follow some of those implications all the way out? Like when you, like, you know what I mean? And seeing like sort of what happens, and all of that lives inside of this sort of soap opera format, which I have a deep, lifelong love of.
I'm just gonna leave it right there. I'm more of like a Dynasty Dallas kid, but you know, Knots Landing, yes.
Yeah, that's all part of
Falcon
it. Not
Crest.
Landing, yeah, that's all. No, for me, I was a Melrose Place. Yeah, you can watch Falcon Crest now on Amazon for free. It's on. I think it's on Amazon for free because I started watching it because I'd never seen it because it was a little before my time. But I was like a Melrose Place kid. Like Monday nights, every Monday night. What is Amanda and Kimberly and Jane and Sydney? What are they going to do? What's Michael Mancini and Peter? You know,
Peter
up to?
I have for you is a question I ask of all of our guests. But I'm going to tell you, you had me from Hello with A Strange Loop. With the Usher, this urgent calling of Usher, which gave me so much of one of my favorite musicals of all time, Company, Bobby, Baby, Bobby. Who inspires you? Who are your influences? We're gonna double back to that. Who are your influences?
Oh, I mean, it's so many of them. Like, obviously, you know, I always call my Trinity, Joni, Tori, and Liz. They're the mother, the daughter, and the Holy Ghost to me. But then also, like, I'm a huge Clark Sisters fan, and that's a big influence on the music. I grew up across the street from Dorinda Clark Cole for many years. She was my neighbor growing up in Detroit. I love all my Motown and like the 3 Degrees and just all of that sort of stuff. Like Ray Goodman and Brown, the Spinners. And in musical theater, Kirsten Childs is somebody who's like so important to me. She wrote the musical The Bubbly Black Girl Sheds Her Chameleon Skin, which premiered at Playwrights Horizons about 18 years before A Strange Loop did. And it's a semi-autobiographical musical about a Black girl growing up in Los Angeles during the civil rights era and into the 70s. And it was a huge touchstone for me while I was in the midst of developing A Strange Loop. So Kirsten Childs and her music is unbelievable. So I always highly recommend checking out the cast album online or wherever you get music. Stu Passing Strange was another huge touchstone for me. Bill Finn's work. He was my teacher at NYU. He did the musicals Falsettos and Trousers and the annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Sondheim is someone who I don't count necessarily as an influence, but it's definitely an inspiration because of his sort of puzzle master qualities in how he approaches songwriting like it's playwriting. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. I take inspiration from literally everywhere. But those are just a few people who I really admire.
And I'm so glad that we got to speak to you today because my musical theater heart is singing, I tell you, because you're actually our first musical theater talent on this show. And so thank you for blessing us with that. It's an honor for me as well. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Michael R. Jackson, thank you so much for coming on Writing Black and giving us all this like amazing energy and amazing backstory to Usher and to A Strange Loop, which is extended on Broadway. So good on you. Yes. If you guys are in New York, come through.
Check it out, please.
And
love to have
thank
y'all.
you again, Michael.
And we'll be right back with more Writing Black.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the GRIO Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
All right, we're back. Let's get into it.
So as always, this is the part of the show where I talk about my recommendations and what I love, typically related to our guest on the show. And I gotta say, one of the reasons it was so special for me to speak with Michael R. Jackson today is that there is this really interesting kind of dichotomy that exists in the American theater, which is that while Black people are, maybe not as widely as we should be, but I think widely recognized as the architects of a lot of American music, when it comes to the American musical theater, we are largely absent in terms of credits and, really being given the platforms to tell our stories. I mean, even some of the greatest American musicals that feature Black characters, I'm looking at you, Dreamgirls, and a few others, were not written by Black people, inspired by, but not written by Black people. So, as somebody who is a profound lover of musical theater myself, grew up in that tradition, so deeply admires that tradition, admires Black artistry, Black stories, Black music, Black acting and dancing and expression. I am always thrilled to champion works by Black playwrights and particularly Black musical playwrights, because I'd love to see more people entering the space. They're out there, and beyond your big box musicals like, The Color Purple, shout out to The Color Purple, and the MJ musical and things like that. They're out there. And so I'm just going to say, if you love music and you love theater, look for your Black musical theater writers. Become one if you can, because it is a genre that is, I think, in desperate need of more of our voices. There's more coming, but, we belong there as much as we belong in any other aspect of American music. So that's just me.
a songwriter with a dream.
We'll see you next time on Writing Black. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Writing Black. As always, you can find us on the theGrio app or wherever you find your podcasts.
The theGrio Black Podcast Network is here, and it's everything you've been waiting for. News, talk, entertainment, sports, and today's issues, all from the Black perspective. Ready for real talk and Black culture amplified? Be inspired. Listen to new and established voices now on the theGrio Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the theGrio mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.